Thanks everybody for being here. Anna, thanks for such a nice and gracious welcome. I really appreciate it. And yeah, I also am recognizing, I've been in the game for a while. It doesn't feel like it, but yeah, time does fly. I'm just curious, let's make this interactive because I love to see where people are sort of coming from. Can you just chat in, if you're a business owner or if you're an employee or where you're from, just a little snippet so I can start to see what kind of energy we got going on in this room.
Uh, my coworker and I are from Germany.
Oh,
So
great.
we're both work in the talent and human relations side of things. So.
Perfect. Gotcha. Okay, thanks. I come from Mexico, an employee of Ocio. I'm hoping I'm pronouncing these. Jump in if I'm not.
Correct.
Berlin.
Sorry, I don't know. Yeah, sorry, I'm on my phone, so I am a bit texting and so.
That's okay.
Yeah, I also live in Germany, but I live in Hamburg.
Okay, spread out. And community intern. Okay, great. So we're having a lot of different backgrounds, and South Asian backgrounds and migrants and freelancers. So everybody's in Japan, now in Denmark. This must be Akiko. I think we've met earlier. So now it's coming in. Oh, this is great. So keep the comments and the ideas coming. And yeah, so basic, long story short, what do I add that hasn't already been said? Yeah, so I've been living with diversity and inclusion. It's been parallel to my life, like it has been for all of you, likely. We have the intersectional aspects of us where many of us are foreigners. So that gives you one. If you happen to be underrepresented gender in your space or, color or religion, you name it, you just start adding those layers of some would say complexity. I call them wonderful layers of what makes us unique and individual. So like you, I've probably dealt with aspects of diversity and inclusion throughout my life, not always recognizing what it was. I do tend to tell many of the clients I worked with, I didn't really pick up diversity and inclusion as a thing, as many people call it, that thing, until I was in my 30s. And that's because I had done the traditional education in university. I'd gone to a very big company and gotten to their management training program and, could see the sky was the limit. I was traveling all over the world, you name it, I was doing it. And I felt like I was in the place with a lot of great people. And then it was around the time where I was basically here in Denmark and I was in a different industry where I really wanted to be, there was path to partner. You could be client facing, trying to get business. And I had people blocking clearly any path, any opportunity that I really wanted to try and build. It was very explicit. It was very clear. And it was then where I started realizing, I was thinking, is it that person, that boss that just does everything wrong? And, my kids say, Mom, you talked about him all the time. I didn't realize that at the time. But then I came to realize when I tried to escalate things that it wasn't just the boss, because his success was what the company wanted more of. And the way he got success was sometimes treating people that were different. You didn't have a chance. And so I could begin to see what was called the systemic biases that were in organizations and bigger places and recognize that wasn't the place for me. And it was right around that time where I was looking into, of course, I can build a company and work with diversity and inclusion. But when they were saying, the company was saying, nobody really is interested in diversity and inclusion. This was 2019, just to give you some indication of that. We're not interested in it. It's not necessary. It's like, okay. So I was on the backside of that, making up private networks of people that I thought were what I would consider inclusive leaders, having events and, kind of get-togethers, kind of like what Anna's done here. We started talking, and then I realized there is something. And so when I left that company, I started Inclusive Matters as a company. And that was in May of 2020. For some of you, you might recognize end of May 2020, Black Lives Matter, the newest edition, as I would call it, because we've had this many times before. It came up, and this time it went global. And when that happened, I was thinking, in a good way, I'm going to be, people are going to see me now. And they did. But what was really interesting is how they engaged. companies were coming out of the woodworks to say, hey, can you come and talk to us? Can you come and, give us the unfiltered experience of what it's like to be a Black person in your environment? And, just tell us and talk to all of our stakeholders because we need to know how to be better. And can you donate your time? I heard that so many times. And I would say from the beginning, I knew that I was going to have this game to play with people. So it's like, you know what? Anything's possible. Here's my invoice. When you pay it, we can talk about anything you want to talk about. And oftentimes, 9 out of 10 times, I wouldn't hear anything back from those clients. So that just went to show that, okay, I've started a business. Everybody wants to talk about diversity and inclusion, wants to listen, but the bigger picture, people weren't really interested in. So that's how I kind of got my start in the industry. And it ended up being that I had to make it very clear to a certain very large company that if you want me to donate my time, I want you to think about the group of people that they had an ERG, an employee resource group that was primarily for people of color. And they were supposed to go out and find people to come and speak. And they were saying to me, we love you to speak, but we have a policy that, you donate your time. And I said to them, I want you to think about this for a second. You're telling me that your company is not willing to invest in you all, this group of diverse individuals for their company. You have to go out and find people to work for free. So what does that say about how they're going to invest in you? And I had that conversation with somebody on their board of this ERG, and they came back about an hour later and said, okay, how much would you like to make? And that was where the first client paid, but I had to really kind of start pushing in some buttons saying, if you continue working like this, how do you think that's going to reverberate for the rest of your business? So that's kind of how I got into the space. So I'm here to say it's a messy environment. It's one where there is this grassroots side, people that are in the front lines, more junior workers, typically who are the diverse individuals in the company, who have so much passion, energy, wherewithal. They're wanting to do a lot of things, and they do within the company, but unfortunately, their influence only goes so far, because then you hit middle management that's supposed to be dealing with, I've got to get my numbers, I've got to get those sales numbers in, the crisis is happening. I don't know how to do this D&I stuff, so why don't I just leave it to all those people who are volunteering their time? And then you have the senior leadership team, who are the ones who are basically in one way in the line of fire, because if they do something that is not correct or can be seen as very what's the word, there's bias, or there's some sort of, they've slipped up in their statements, they're the first person to get hit with a lot of the negative press and so forth. So you have a senior leadership team that's very worried about their behavior and, should I say this? Can I do that? And then you have the people who are the front line who don't have as much accessibility to the senior leadership team. And in the middle is this gaping hole where the two just aren't connecting. So I tend to work with the senior management teams, because once they start to speak and message out that this is important, it will then trickle through to the managers, the middle managers, because suddenly they're being measured on that new message. So that's what I've been doing. And yeah.
For those who don't join regularly and are interested just in this topic, let me just walk people through the format. First and foremost, we had an amazing introduction from the speaker and Chandre, and I guess a lot of questions are rising up. So how we're gonna go about, I'm gonna have an interesting discussion with Chandre, but I would like to orderly, and I want to invite you. That's why we always like to have these recordings in a very dynamic way. So just raise your hand, show me on the chat if you don't want to show yourself your question. Let's dive in, because I don't want to have a session where we have the Q&A afterwards. Let's try to fit it as we jump. So let me go in topics, and I hope that we can all go together through these topics. So I would like to start, Chandre, based on what you're saying. You're nailing into a couple of topics for example, on the senior management, something that many of us working, at least in my case, I've worked in human rights and migration for so many years. We know that if we want to make a real change in systems, sometimes you have to step back, to let others lead, to let others change things. And sometimes it's also about that on diversity and inclusion. We have too many statistics that says that it promotes growth. We know that women who are leaders lead better, that increases their productivity and also more sales. So when we have all these stats and we have all these numbers already there, every article, every big magazine showing it to our faces, why still we have such an incredible pay gap? Why still in 2023 we have to talk about diversity and inclusion? Why, after doing everything that it's been in our power, we still are today trying to lift up those who we call the ethnic minority? We still are facing so many challenges. So what are we? Where are we today? What's the diversity and inclusion today for companies? Is it a trend or is it not anymore? What are the current state of companies when they reach out to you today compared to 5 years ago when Black Lives Matter happened? What is their request today?
It's very good. And I can hear the frustration and see the heads nodding, because y'all know we've been there. We're trying, like, man. So there are a couple of aspects to this. So in terms of trends, I would say that the diversity and inclusion roles in Europe, I'm going to try to keep this in the Europe space, they're stagnating, if not becoming fewer. So of course, when Black Lives Matter happened, it was a catalyst for companies that, oh my gosh, we have to do something. And then it was like everywhere you looked, there were diversity and inclusion heads popping up. I do a study every year of the C25, the biggest 25 Danish listed companies. And I look at what I call the diversity footprint, how their leadership looks, if they have a diversity inclusion head and where they are ranked in the company and so forth. And I can tell you, just in the last year, there has been so many shifts of people moving out of roles. And this is pretty common. 18 months is, if you're a chief diversity officer, 18 months is kind of the normal tenure. And that's primarily because the person, one, gets a role completely D&I, that's great. But then what'll happen is they quickly realize that as a part of the company, they're part of the culture. And if they're expected to be a change agent in a culture that is really, really tough to change, that's a big topic. And many people just leave it to that D&I head to do without much staff. So people become fatigued, diversity fatigue sets in, and you'll have people leaving those roles. And they'll end up going to another company, likely the same title, with the hopes of doing the same thing, but maybe getting through a little bit better. But that's the trend we'll see. It's stagnating in that there aren't so many jobs, but then there is a lot of, there's a lot of shifts among those roles. And what we're also seeing is that the roles themselves, like you'll have many people that'll be, you might hear the title, I am the head of learning and development and the head of D&I. So somebody that's got multiple titles, and D&I tends to fall way back in the back of that long title. And my pure opinion on that is pick a lane, because do you have any senior executive vice president that's got, I'm the head of marketing and, finance and so forth. You need to kind of know where your space is. So that's the other thing. And the reason, though, that all this is happening is clearly the economy. We've had so many issues that are putting the brakes on all spending, and anything that is uncertain, leaders just sort of want to hold on, or they're in this state of petrification. They don't want to move at all. So what I've seen is a slowdown in clients booking or making strategic engagements. They want to, they might have had the budget at the end of the year, but there's something is just worrying for them. So they're kind of holding off. So there's this kind of wait and see phase. But I also think it's the downgrading of the prioritization of diversity, because like you said, it's about women. It's about, we know, or I say it's part of the statistics on, we need women, we need this, that we need this. And the people who are in these roles in Europe are white women. So they're focusing heavily on what they know. that is true, white, women, female issues. And unfortunately, that has meant an undercurrent of very disengaged, diverse, I call it enriching talent, that's a diversely enriching talent, that is thinking, wait, where is there anything for us? When are we going to talk about religion? When are we going to take up the issue of ethnic backgrounds? And because many people say, well, we don't measure those things, that's a different issue, but we don't measure them here, so it doesn't exist. So that is the problem. And now because you have a lot of D&I leaders or practitioners sitting in these roles, recognizing the need for inclusion, but they don't know how to integrate it because they're working from a very measurement-oriented diversity. We need to increase diversity. So, but to retain that staff requires inclusive leadership. And that's what's completely not on the map yet. It's coming, you're hearing the words, but that's the trend. And that's where it's very confusing for many, and because many just don't have a connection to that. So I would say that those are the trends we're seeing within the D&I roles, and why those statistics are so heavily prevalent. It's because people have to measure something. The EU is saying that you have to measure your female leadership or how many women are in a company, I think from a middle size now. It used to be just the biggest company. Now it's across middle-sized companies. So everybody's, getting their ducks in a row for that. But anything else, people are like, well, we don't really worry about that. We'll have pride events and we'll celebrate that in Women's Day. And that's pretty much it. So.
Again, I'm going to ask the question to everybody. Please raise your hands or just write me here in the chat. I want to ask something, or just ask or add anything as well. That's also very valid. So, Chandre, what I'm hearing here, and this is something that it's very interesting for people like us who have been in this for so long. I don't give personally advice on diversity and inclusion because I'm an expert on a very specific topics. But I'm not guiding companies on that. And oftentimes people reach out to me because the fact that I work with migrants and I've worked with migrants for many times, they think I'm an expert and they just reach out to me. So I think that sometimes, even for us who are considered a diverse talent or diverse backgrounds, sometimes it also takes how to give it to the experts and listen to the experts and send it and channeling things through experts. And it always happens every time I see somebody who got a new job on diversity and inclusion. Undeniably, I go to their LinkedIn accounts and I just go behind and see what's their background, what they studied, if they studied that or not, what's their experience. So what are the roles today? You talk about the roles on diversity and inclusion. How does the typical role of a person in charge of diversity and inclusion should have? What are the things that we should be looking into? Because I see, especially after the Black Lives Matters, and as I said, and I keep saying, many of us who were working with migrants ever since, we saw a shift. And we saw a completely, and migration is one of it. It's not necessarily the whole thing, but it's one part of the whole diversity and part of inclusion. But even us who were in a very specific area, I'm sure that many of people who were working with female founders before and so on and so on, they saw a shift completely after Black Lives Matters. And many of us, quite frankly, were confused what to do. What's the correct way to go forward? And then we saw how the roles of people applying for HR departments or diversity and inclusion, they started to change as well to look very different. But beyond that, it's about what's their background. And so I want to know what's your take on that, because what we saw in that shift, and if we see a change in the roles and the color of skin of people in charge of or being in managerial positions, that's amazing. But what we also saw in parallel is a lot of what is called diversity washing. So out of a sudden, there were too many experts on the field that quite frankly didn't ever had any experience or whatsoever. So, and very few of us, sometimes we are very honest and say, look, we're not an expert, I can connect you with the one. So what's your take on that? What's the typical role of a person who's in charge of that? And what should it be the things? If people are interested, where should we start to learn and unlearn to become an expert?
So Oh, there's a lot to that. And let me roll this back to an experience. So I'm sitting in a room. I think this is, goodness. Let's call it like 15, 20 years ago. I was sitting in a room in some part of the business, and so the topic comes on to diversity and inclusion, which I wasn't in essence a part of that world, but I was the only person of color in the room. And I hear, Chef Chandre, what do you think Black people are thinking about? And I kind of looked over like, because guess what? I was seen as the expert because I was the only one that they knew that could talk about what they didn't know. So we run into this little world of, okay, somebody's actually asking our opinion. That's nice. It's a little bit more inclusive. Some people can be very, or another typical one would ask, how do I do my hair? That one would make me kind of cringe. And I would just tell them, you know what, you can Google that, you know? But what was happening was people were starting to want to understand, they want to know, and they typically go to the one person that they might, you know, feel a little safe with, and you start talking. So depending on the person's personality, they might think, you know, take it somewhere else, or they might be like, okay, I'm going to tell you, and you need to do this, and you need to do that. And so suddenly you have people that are willing to share and willing to share a lot of information that people just never knew about. So expert, what we call an expert, it's kind of this moving target, because now what I see, I have a university degree from an American school. I didn't learn diversity and inclusion there. I have it from the School of Life. I have it from the School of owning my businesses. I've owned several in Denmark, and understanding what it's like to navigate in another language with the different, you know, personalities. I remember when I went to go make a payment for the first company to set it up, I went to the bank that I actually had money in, and you had to come with a certain amount of money in a check to start this incorporation. And I came into the bank, it was back in the day when you could go into the banks. Denmark now is like totally digital. And they looked at the check, and they looked at me and they said, how do I know you're not opening up some pizzeria to launder money? And I was thinking, this is the bank that I actually have my money, my savings account. You can see all my transactions. And I just remember that happening so blatantly. I went home, I was just sort of, you know, went home. And then I got a phone call from the bank's, I guess, manager, who recognized, okay, I had an account here. Sorry, we can take the check, not a problem. And I said, well, you know what, I'm leaving anyway, so don't bother to cash it. I'm moving to a new bank. But that was the experience. And there would be countless others along the way. So people could choose to become very angry about it and not share, or, you know, just have disdain for the power structure. Or people can say, hey, let's try this in another way. So it's a difficult process to say what's expert and what's not, because I didn't gain a degree from this. And now that they do have certifications and spaces that you can go, I know schools in the US are building it up. You have companies, inclusion companies, that are building up credibility. So you can sit online and take a course on inclusion and diversity. I'm sorry, that's not going to do it for me, from my perspective, because unless you've had those lived experiences and somehow can connect them to the wider strategy of the company or your client, it's a difficult, I think it's difficult to pass that knowledge on just through, you know, a quick certification that can be taken place in six days. If you have it along with the wealth of experiences that you can claim and that you understand how to use, then by all means, yes. But I'm a bit concerned about the availability of being seen as accredited in something that is simply so emotionally, you know, wrapped up in how we work. So.
And that's so important, because one of the things that we keep seeing, and that's what I didn't want people to see this conversation, is that we are trying to train, or we're trying to prepare people in diversity and inclusion, rather to share our experiences. And quite frankly, and this is where I would move on to the next topic, is about us, who are usually used as the diverse backgrounds, who are used to portray an example of women or migrants or people of color, or, you know, so what's the best perhaps advice that you can give people like us who are very oftentimes used for it, and they want us in their panels and they want us in their programs, and they want us because we fit in there. It's like we are now the quota for this. We are the quota for certain jobs, and playing the fact that many, especially I'm talking on the group of people that we work with. Right now we have a course for people who wants to join in tech, possibly migrants, and in the last cohort we got more than 2,800 applicants, and 80% of them were women. And from there were people who are unemployed or underemployed, meaning earning, So, and then we see that these programs use this as an example, and oftentimes we are lost. We don't even know if we're fitting into the program. So how to recognize these, when is a real effort, when is diversity washing, how can we on the other side behave towards this, especially if we look very different to the typical managerial level in Europe? How do we behave like this? Should we take advantage? Should we step back? Should we carefully look into what are the tips that you could give us on that direction? Because that's what I meant at the beginning. This is such a big mess and a lot of things happening that quite frankly have left many of us feel lost, who to trust and where to go.
Thank you for bringing these questions to me. I love it, because these are the courageous and the tough conversations that have to be had in order to understand the nuanced setting we're in. So I'm also looking at Michaela's statement about the social media. It's becoming cool to be feminist. And so there's a lot of people that are kind of on the bandwagon of that and how it can be misinterpreted or people can read more expertise into it. It's kind of like looking at the social medias and the filters on everybody and everything looks perfect and that's how it's supposed to be. Whew, okay, let me throw a different perspective at you, okay? So to the question, because I'm the one that's going to try and come at you from a different way we hadn't considered. With all due respect, Anna, what you were talking about makes me think that we as the foreigners, the migrants, we're almost in this role of the victim, the oppressed. And I want to flip that script a bit and make it take it to a point where we have some powers here that we need to be utilizing. I have a personal statistic that I'm relatively new in a business, the business I have now. Every piece of work that I have gained or won from all those companies that you mentioned and the ones that aren't, every single one of them, the contact person, the initial person who brought me into that space was a person who had some major form of diversity in that company. So they might have been the Black person, they might have been the female, they might have been at senior leadership, but they were the female, or they were people who had to influence on my behalf because I wasn't in that company's mindset. They didn't know my name, but these people knew me. And these people took it upon themselves to talk to whomever it was in the company to begin to escalate the conversation to me coming in to pitch and then to eventually win the business. Every single piece of work. And I work with CEOs of companies, and most of them are white men. So for me to be able to be included, to come into a company, somebody had to open up that whole blocked barrier where they were bringing in other people and who knows what, doing diversity, sessions and things like this. And I had the chance to start talking some deep talks with the senior leadership teams. I owe all of that to the underrepresented people in those companies. So now that I have all of us on the screen, when we are in a position where people want to hear your story or whatnot, that is a personal conversation personal decision you should make for yourself, because it is in a way trauma. I heard the term trauma porn the other day, where people would be sitting out talking these listening sessions, as they're called among leaders, to hear how somebody who's transsexual or navigated their world. or Black in the female and it's not in the space, and how they're making it big, so that the person hearing it basically goes back to work, not having needed to do anything other than to listen and feel good about themselves. And yeah, I'll be more open. And that's called trauma porn because of the fact that we, or those who are speaking, are spending a lot of their IP, your intellectual property, number one. And number two, it's traumatic. It's not easy to talk about every barrier you've had. You know, this is an emotional toil that we're doing. And so if you choose to do that, good. If you choose that, or if you're thinking this is not the way I want to be highlighted in the company, then is the chance to influence for people who are not in the room. Use your privilege, the privilege of being seen at that moment and saying, hey, I got somebody who can really kick this into real gear for you, and you need to talk to them. And here's the name. Can I reach out to them? Here, can we set up the meeting? That could probably be the best way to influence yourself and to reposition yourself within the company too, because people will see, oh, you're not the only one. Ah, okay, we could talk to somebody else too. Okay. So I think that would be a way to consider, you know, using that opportunity and not seeing it as so much of a, I'm being exploited, as how do we pivot and turn it into a win-win?
Wonderful. I'm taking amazing words that we're going to publish later. Diversity washing, diversity fatigue, and trauma porn. Nail it. Miriam, you wanted to ask something. If you could briefly introduce yourself for the rest of people who to know you, that would be amazing.
Yeah, thank you, Anna. Also, thank you, Chandre, for your great introduction. My name is Miriam. I work as a junior online marketing manager for Visit Berlin, and I have my own travel company that focuses on the Afro diaspora community in Berlin.
Oh.
And yeah, I really liked what you were saying, because I could definitely also see myself. And one of the great challenges I have is I could definitely see the diversity and inclusion problem within the travel industry, but also in Germany, in Europe specifically. And that's why I created my own company, because I realized, okay, I want to change something. I can't really do it within a company structure. So I tried to do it with my own company. But I often have a problem with charging money. So it's super difficult within these environments to ask for money. So people expect you to, like you already said, to give access to your own information for free. And it's also difficult to also ask, because I don't really know how people are being charged. So as a junior person who studied really long and who started now to do my career, I often have difficulties first. I don't really have access to information. And I also don't really have mentors who can give me information. So sometimes I ask, but I don't really get the information I need. Of course, there are people like Anna who definitely support. But for many of us who are, let's say, are alone in a big company and are being also used as a diversity and inclusion, let's say, token, we often have the problem that the companies from outside are very diverse, or they do advertisement and everything, but then within the company, you are the only person who has to be advocate for these problems, but the company in structure, the structure doesn't really want to change. And then outside of them, let's say, if you want to build your own business, you have the same problems because you are alone, and people don't really believe in your own vision.
Ooh. Oh, you're on mute. I think you're on mute.
Yeah. So I'm asking for some mentoring or advice from you, because you did that on your own as well.
Oh, sure. I would say, one of the things, because I hear that there are some entrepreneurial mindsets in this group, which is wonderful. I think I'm among that crowd. It is very lonely doing any kind of work where you feel like you are the token. Feeling like a token, that's a sign that you might not be in the right environment. Let me just put that out there. or if you are in a space where you're sitting, physically alone, just not with people to gain a lot of space. And that is one of the occupational hazards of being an entrepreneur. And that's because, guess what? We go against the grain. We're thinking of the ideas that are going to disrupt how people are thinking and doing and buying and living. And guess what? When you come up with disruptive ideas, no matter who you are, people are going to raise an eyebrow. They're going to be like, what is this all about? This is so unorthodox or so unconventional. So you're going to get a lot more of the negative feedback than you will, yeah, I'm in, unless like you're in a situation where suddenly everybody needs whatever it is you have. I'm thinking COVID and masks, for example. Everybody needed it. Nobody was asking, they took it. But for most of us, we have ideas, we have products and services that we think we can tweak and provide to the market in just that special way. That's our unique selling proposition or unique value proposition. And because of that time on your own, you will get into your mind and you will start spiraling either up or down, depending on if you had a good week or a bad week financially. So be aware that, first of all, you're not alone. I'm thinking in Danish, entrepreneurs are very much in a class to themselves. And sometimes people like that alone time, but I'm not one that does. So what I have chosen to do is to surround myself with communities that I feel where I'm not the only one. I'm the average of the group. I'm a part of a business consulting company that I'm a client to them, and they basically create a community from all over the world of people who are solopreneurs, entrepreneurs. They might own consulting companies or firms. They can be very small, but basically they graduate you in terms of how you're doing business wise. And I've been with them for about 1.5 years, and I can tell you that it is very diverse in all sorts of ways. And every time I'm talking to them, I'm just feel like, yes, oh, okay. Yes, and they're different industries and different, services. So my little space of my little expertise area, I'm always listening for what I can gain from the success stories of those in the group. So those were different. But I also know that it's important for me to ask and to come in and say, hey, listen, I have this issue. Is anybody else going through it? So we could also benefit from being open to the universe, the environment, whatever your space is, thinking, because that is where when we start to ask, then you'd be surprised at who could come in and help and collaborate. One quick story to that, I work with freelancers from the Fivers and the Upworks and the so forth and so on. I have researchers that I've helped. And I was working with someone who was doing an administrative task for me for about 1 year. And basically they were taking some of the recorded conversations, looking at trends, and we could put that into a report and give to the client, so forth. And after the first time, the first piece of work, she said she really enjoyed the work, and she's in Pakistan. And I was like, that's great, wonderful. And then we did another round. And she then tells me, listen, I just want you to know, I really enjoy working in diversity and inclusion. So much so that, I did this project where we brought 30,000 Pakistani girls around to talk about, I believe it was tuberculosis in the community. So we were engaging women, girls to be out in the community. She had done a TED Talk, folks. This is a woman that I was just, back and forth on, I think it was Upwork for all these months. And she had this expertise, this drive, this immense knowledge that suddenly I was like, wow, okay, let's talk some more. And we unearthed that simply from having open collaborations, reaching out to help. And now we're in an environment where we're doing much more strategic kind of thought processes and research together. And that's just one of the many stories that I have around the people that have been working with me and collaborating. And I say collaborating because sometimes you have to start with that. Give a little, also, see what you can do. Then you could possibly become sort of partners in all things there. And then you can leverage that when you're trying to build your business or in your own work, in your own employee space with another colleague helping to influence them. So I see there's a lot of opportunity, but please try not to get caught up in your world because it is very, it can be a little bit, insular at a point, to the point where you actually don't get as much as you could get done. So.
And one thing I would like to add to what Chandre is doing is and saying, which is completely accurate. I can share with you so many ways, and even myself, how I started to price my worth, which I'm taking this idea from you, Miriam. I'm going to make an event about that, because that's why I believe so much in communities. So we can go back, have the trust, and ask other people like, hey, how did you do that? How did you start a price for this and so on, and have complete open channel to ask anyone around you. In my case, when I built my first organization, which had a very rapid success adoption in the German market back then, I was quite overwhelmed by all these mentors and luxury mentors I had around me. I actually had nothing but mentors and people who were like the director of innovation of X company, I'm not going to say the name, and everything that you could imagine, it was set for success. But I was still not being able to pay myself. For the first 3 years, every money that was coming in, it was spent in the business itself. I had a big mistake because I made a co-working space, and it's one of the business that I will never recommend any people to go into if you don't have money, because it's very draining. But what is really interesting and what I learned about that is that in my first 3 years, despite the success and all the invitations around the world and everything, I was not paying myself. I was not making money. I was compromising my own worth. And all these mentors with all the pricing models and all the amazing successes, business model that you can even imagine, was not allowing me to pay myself, to pay everything else but myself. And so one day, one amazing peer, which had no business background whatsoever, is this amazing Somalian activist. Her name is Fatuma Musa. She works with women, African women in refugee camps in Brandenburg, here outside Berlin. This woman came to me and said, stop doing it for free. Charge them. Next time they come to you, because everyone, especially when the whole migration happened in 2015 in Europe, everybody wanted to do research on me and research on what I was doing and put it here in Cambridge and Oxford and this and that and that. And nothing was paid. And she said, everybody's earning money. They have their salaries. Start asking for money and you will see how they all will disappear. And it's true. From all these people until now, I can tell you that they all know that I exist, but they would not dare to come to me because I will ask for money. But at least those few who say yes to pay are the ones who are paying my salary and the salary of the people that I work with.
And I think that's a wonderful thing that you decided. I think, because I would even move it from, I asked for money. It's like, no, we need to make sure that I'm getting the value that I'm providing you. So you value this, it has a worth. I have worth. And there are so many people who start businesses who are wondering about their pricing and as if it's too low or something. I can guarantee you one of the areas I don't have to worry so much, I think about is I know that I have value and worth, and I contribute that to any of my clients. And I know that because I have to be very clear with myself, because when I send an invoice out, it's premium. It's a premium invoice. And people are thinking about, well, in the industry, when we work with diversity and inclusion practitioners, we might pay, I'm just throwing out a number here, it's $1,000 for a day or something. And I'm like, no, that's kind of like my hourly rate kind of thing. And I've had to be very clear about that because I pinpointed what it is I do. I work with diversity and inclusion strategy, helping companies get to the bottom. They're connecting that to their bottom line. And their bottom lines have a lot more zeros than mine does. So that means that when they get the value, it should show up in my work as well. So that is something that maybe it could be just the experience of 20 years doing this. I came from an industry that was well paying. So I also started from a bar of financially privileged, if you think in that way. But I've also had a company, I have a company, and I have to have my concerns. I have my KPIs. I have, the market is in flux. What does that mean for me? I am acutely aware of that. So the same worries that Miriam might be having about, you know, who do I talk to? What's the right price? I still keep my ear to the ground and I still ask around to make sure that I'm aligned. I think someone's on mute.
I would just want to say thank you to the person who's taking the amazing notes, because we love to make a post, a wrap-up post after this for everybody, and also the people to watch the recordings. But what's more important is, as I said, and I don't want to take much time from all of you, because I know that it's the first day after a long weekend of holidays, especially those who are based in Germany. And also taking that, I don't want to take much more time from Chandre, but what I want to do and what our goal at Migrapreneur is to allow you to get to know people like Chandre, connect with her, connect all of you on LinkedIn. The best way to elevate our worth is the people we know. And one of them, to me, and especially in the field of diversity and inclusion, that is Chandre. And I want you all to know that she exists, that she's doing this, and to collaborate. And that's where she said, sometimes it's gonna be the one who looks like us, who's working in certain areas, who's gonna open up the path. And trust me, this works. And at the end, even if it takes years, this will pay off one day. So if you want to, Miriam, if you want to share something else or somebody else, if not, we can wrap up this just short, amazing 1 hour session, but respecting everybody's times. I just wanted to do this as an introduction and connection. Miriam, go for it.
Yeah, short question. I just saw what you're doing, Chandre, and I saw that you are working with UN as well, or you worked with them before. Since you mentioned collaboration, in case you want to work with someone who does research as well, I would love to collaborate with you.
Oh, wow. Thank you, Miriam. This is always wonderful to hear that more heads together could be fantastic. And please connect. You can see my spelling of my name here. So you can find it on LinkedIn. I'm always open to these wonderful opportunities, because you never know the beauty that comes out of this. And it could be from a professional standpoint. It might be that you actually just get more insight. I also am sending out a lot of information to my clients. So in, just things that are in the market, so we can add you, of course, to our I wouldn't call it mailing list, but it is what it is. And or we come up with a lot of different aspects for leaders to think about. So happy to connect, and very much encourage you to do so. One last little statistics. I did an article that's showing up on Consulting Success. You might be able to see it if you get on LinkedIn, you'll see, I think my most recent post talks about an article around diversity within new companies. So I was highlighted in an interview, or not an interview, an article that I wrote about diversity and inclusion. And in it, there's some statistics that I thought were really interesting, but one in particular, in the US, that immigrants are 80% more likely to start a business in the US than native-born Americans. And if you take that trend and then it will ripple over to Europe, as most do in diversity and inclusion, you will probably see a very similarly high number of migrants, foreigners that start businesses. And that could be because of the situation they're having, where they're reaching barriers inside their current work, or that they might not even be able to get work because of the name on the CV, and you name it. But that just says that there is likely going to be a large population, which Anna's probably already tapped into, of people who are like-minded, entrepreneurial spirits, and activists in their own way for their own products and ideas. But there certainly is a market, I think, right in your backyard to make a very strong community. So I hope you can do that.
Amazing. And I couldn't end this session better than this, because that's exactly what we're trying to tap in. Also, because the realities, unfortunately, of many migrants is that they are building businesses out of a need. Many of them are building out of a need, or, which is the new trend that we've seen on members joining the community, are these so-called highly skilled talent who were brought from abroad, and they didn't fit in the company, and they had all this talent. They already made all the move to Germany, and so they decided to become entrepreneurs. So we are there to support people, to support each other. There's many more things coming. We also are very open these days because we're going to start a new program very soon where I'm going to welcome all of you to join as mentors for those who are looking for jobs. Because of this trend, we believe that a lot of people should not become entrepreneur because it's a very tough sector, where there's not that many funds available, where it's depending on the vulnerability that the person has. Being an entrepreneur, quite frankly, it's a very tough sector and field to enterprise. So we want them to find jobs in certain sectors to gain a little bit more experience, to get inserted in the market and basically earn money. We also will have scholarships for those building companies and so on. But I want to invite you all, is also from a peer to peer. And I want first and foremost to invite the community of Migrantpreneur to sign up to be a mentor. We have a little bit of budget. We don't believe in paying these mentoring hours for free, because we are all been there and it takes time and our own know-how and knowledge. So sign up and be there around, because we're going to need you. We have all these students who I just mentioned before waiting and looking for help. And we don't want them to find in entrepreneurship just a way out, because sometimes it doesn't even have an easy way out. But regarding that entrepreneurship, yes, a lot had to be done, especially in Europe, unfortunately, still a lot. But Chandre, once again, thank you so much. With this, I wanted to be very punctual because you are basically gifting us this hour and this time to all of us.
It's been my pleasure and honor. Thank you. Really, thank you. Thank you.
And I want us, I just posted here Chandre's link to LinkedIn. Please follow her. And I hope at the end of the year, when we're organizing a bigger event, hopefully we can bring her here to Berlin. We can meet each other in person, and we can have a better session and know-how, and just listen from her and learn from her and grow together. That's the most important thing. Chandre, thank you.
Thank you, everyone.